Hey, this is Robert. Thank you for tuning in to Station Square. And yes, I know another off-camera interview, but hey, sometimes I mean, less is more, you know what I mean? But thank you so much for tuning in regardless. Oh my goodness, great intro. But yeah, just going back to old roots it seems, but yeah, just there will be more on-camera stuff, no worries in the, next couple of episodes, but regardless, thanks for watching. And we got ourselves a very big special guest in the corner. This is probably gonna butcher their name, so I'm just gonna let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kdin Jenzen. I'm a voice actress, voiceover director, casting director, and a million, billion, jillion other things that I've done in my entire life.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much, Kaden, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been okay temperatures in Los Angeles lately. It's been kind of warm, but not too warm. I know the rest of the country's been like on fire, so it's hard to complain that it's slightly warm in Los Angeles lately.
Yeah, and trust me, I really wish it would be the case. We could get this kind of weather for next week and what's coming up. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just like, yeah, I kind of wish that it would be this way for like the rest of the summertime, but
Oh goodness.
yeah.
It would be great if it just 82. I'm going to just say right now, as somebody who grew up in the desert for a very long time, I think 82 is hot enough. I think that's enough. I think 82 is a great temperature, and I think that should be as warm as it should ever possibly be ever.
Amen to that. But hey, we're here and we're just gonna chat it up and just talk about stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about like because I know you've been really just kind of all over the place. So just tell us what you've been up to, what projects and what shows. Just just say what's been really keeping you just occupied for this year and just as of late.
So let's see. A lot of what I've been doing lately, and for those who don't know, I moved to Los Angeles from Austin, Texas, a number of years ago. I did the whole voiceover Texas stuff for a while, which um, is a lot more remote at the time. It was very early Panini time, so everything was pretty much remote. And when the opportunity arose to move to LA, I signed with an agency. I moved to Los Angeles, and there's been like as soon as I moved to Los Angeles, there was a strike and another strike and another strike and another strike. So it was kind of like absolutely wall to wall, like advocating for better pay, advocating for better rights, advocating for anti AI and AI protections for everything. And so throughout all that, I've worked on a couple different projects. Probably like my favorite among them that's been released that I can also talk about is Unicorn Overlord. I've been a huge fan of Vanillaware games for a very, very, very long time. So the fact that I got to go in, record for one of my favorite game developers of all time, and be a playable, recruitable character who can be romanced and all that stuff, it was really, really fun. But throughout all that time and through all the strikes and everything, the one thing that was basically a mainstay, and I know a lot of other folks have kind of similar thoughts on this, is the indie space was pretty good. The indie space was pretty good, but commercial stuff was great. Commercial stuff was basically keeping a lot of the union folks afloat while everything else was under constant either no work orders or in different ways just trying to like find out where things lie. And now that all the strikes are finally over, things are starting to roll in again for animation, for voice, for video games and everything like that. But I during the whole strike of everything, I was the voice of Jamba Juice for about 18 months. I was the voice of Stouffer's Frozen Foods for about a year. I did a couple Subaru ads in that whole section as well. And there was something I recorded for just before everything started going into to strike zone. I recorded a little thing for Disney for their business side, not for animation, not for games. It was for their business advertising side. And as cool as it would be for me to say, yeah, I did ads for Disneyland or Disney World or a Disney movie. No, no, no. It's back end business to business recruiting stuff. But it was still really cool. The folks there were super passionate, and it was really nice to actually get to like peek behind the curtain of the mouse ears, so to speak, in one way or another.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Just knowing that you did a lot of this stuff, and especially around the time that you mentioned because there was a strike, followed by another, followed by another, followed by another. So it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, it's just nonstop. But
Yeah,
hey,
it's been rough.
yeah.
And while the voice acting side of things is mostly calm, there's still a lot of like the animation side of stuff where animators are still advocating for certain protections. And I know they're still in talks. They haven't gotten to full on strike territory yet, but there's a lot of conversations happening around like the indie animation space as well, because there's the whole thing of like a lot of different indie productions are getting picked up by major studios at the same time. So like there's certain shows that are getting picked up by Netflix and getting put on Amazon Prime. And where does that fall for animation workers and what their rights are for different streaming things? And then how do we as voice actors support the actual animation staff and the game developers who are also going under various different things that are happening with either strikes or layoffs and so on and so forth. So like how do we creatively support each other while also at the same time make sure that we're actually able to support ourselves and with our own craft, because it seems like everything's on fire. And like it was almost like goodness, it was almost like I'm trying to find the word for it. It's not serendipity. That's the good way of saying it. It was almost ominous in that the first thing that happened in Los Angeles this year was the big fire. And it's like, oh, that's setting the tone. That felt like it was going to set the tone for 2025 for everything. And it still continues to have that energy of trying to put out fires, be it metaphorically or literally, across various industries. And like the arts feel like they're constantly under attack at this point. So like trying to like drum up support and keep people passionate and keep people caring without a lot of folks, who are outside the purview and outside of the industry, prevent them from getting, compassion fatigue, which I know a lot of folks have said. It's like, it's hard to care about everything all the time with everything I have, because there's just so much going on, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed by like the amount of everything.
Oh, yeah. I definitely am right there with you. So, like I said, it can be really tough just trying to put out the fires when 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 everything is just going ablaze just
Yeah,
everywhere, like
exactly.
metaphorically and literally, like you said. It's just yeah, yeah, there's just so much that is like if we were to open up like a long like can of worms of just everything that has just been happening, like just all the
Oh god,
chaos
yes.
with AI and just, strikes and so on and so forth. Like I literally just did an interview with somebody who um well, it's kind of like a follow-up interview, so you might be like they've been a guest on the show a few
Hmm.
times in the past, but you'll probably see on my YouTube channel in like um maybe a month or so when I'm not under such a large, backlog of stuff. So anyways, to get back to the point, we were also kind of talking about how we're kind of in such a downturn in the industry. Like we're kind of like in a bit of a recession when it comes like
Oh
a
yeah.
dry spell for entertainment, like just all over. And um, no joke, I checked out Crispin Freeman's podcast, highly recommended, where he was also doing like an episode of like how to stay artistically motivated during times of like, when an industry is kind of like in a creative like downward spiral. And
Yeah.
it's just a really good one. So I'll probably include the episode in the description once this goes up. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, just highly recommended. Highly recommend this podcast. Just great info just in there. Just definitely, you know, just watch it. Voice acting mastery. So boom, there you go. Plug.
but but yeah, like getting that like just saying it definitely feels like there's a disconnect happening a lot because people tend to and over the last I feel like 12 to 18 months or something along those lines, especially like after the animation strike, the voiceover animation strike ended, and then immediately the video games one started after that. I feel like a lot of voice actors, and a lot of would-be hopefuls kind of got disillusioned in a lot of ways, and this is just what happens basically every time a contract comes up for negotiation for voice actors or for actors in general. But voice acting, especially any of the things that specifically target voice actors more, there's always way more negotiations about that stuff than there are when it comes to like the live action side of things. And it's not to say that the live action side of things has it either easy or anything like that. It's just there's a little bit more powerhouse motivation. There's a lot of big players in those games that have a little bit more heavy lifting that can kind of like get things motivated and get things moving. Where I still feel like even though like I feel like animation as a major medium and everything, it's been over 100 years at this point. It's one of those things that it's still looked as the lesser. It's the other one, and then like when a good quote unquote good animation movie comes out, it's like, oh wow, I can't believe this animated movie is this good. It's like, well, why can't you believe it's that good? It's like, well, it's an animated movie. It's like some of the best movies of all time, the most critically acclaimed both by fans and by critics. They're animated. They're animated movies. These are people who have been, doing stuff for a very long time. And I feel like there is a misunderstanding that uh, anytime and I'll point direct fingers. I'll point direct fingers because I think it's important to you know understand where things are going. So K-pop Demon Hunters is huge. It's everywhere. Great performances from the actors, great musical performance from the vocals for the singers, who are different than the actual actors themselves. The animation team really understood the assignment. It's a really fun movie. It's really, really great. They're trying to pitch that for like 10 years. It was such a huge thing that they were trying to get going and trying to get motivated. And when it finally came out, it exploded and it popped off. And the first thing that happened within like 2 weeks of the movie, coming out and being available and going viral and getting everywhere is they announced a live action adaptation immediately. It was almost immediate. And it feels like the the message was lost. And it constantly happens. And it's not to say that there is a bad thing for adaptations or for anything like that. Books get adapted into movies, movies get adapted into games, games get adapted into TV shows, and so on and so forth. There's this circular thing, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's a growing pain of understanding what makes sense, what doesn't. I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog's movie franchise kind of like understood the assignment in a way that made it uniquely its own, but also like gave good send ups to all the characters. And so it's just like, oh, well, that's good. But like the moment you have one really good adaptation in that thing, everybody starts chasing the same thing and just starts greenlighting all these things without like a real understanding of how an adaptation for anything like that works. What's the motivation? What's the purpose? What's the drive? And I guarantee you within the next like 2 years, probably less, depending on how fast Netflix wants to turn around on that, but that K-pop Demon Hunters live action version will probably happen sooner rather than later, and it's going to come out, and good, bad, or otherwise, it will dictate the future of that IP more than the actual animated one did. And I feel like that's a misunderstanding of what makes animation so good and what makes some of that so fun and so enticing and such a passionate like amazing piece of artwork. Um, and there's this weird divide that still exists that animation is lesser. And if animation is lesser, then video games are lesser than animation because they're just animation for people who want violence and so on and so forth. But like I feel like there's just stuff that you can only tell in a video game. A story you can only really tell through that interactivity. A story that can only really work well animated. And, I feel like we've been riding these live action adaptation waves for the last 20 years. And it's not that people aren't passionate about making them. It's not that people who are acting bad or anything like that. but it feels like just a misunderstanding of what made that animated version so good and so beloved that when we get to the live action version, it's missing part of its heart, part of its soul almost. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing, and it's cool that they announced a potential sequel to K-pop Demon Hunters as well, for it to be animated as well. But we it's like it's far more likely that that live action one is going to come out first, and then it'll dictate the future and far beyond that for a lot of different things. So it's disheartening. And for those people who really want to get into animation or video games or voice acting, to see things in a current downward spiral, um um it's it hurts. It definitely hurts, but it's not that things aren't being made. And I think that that's kind of the core of, like, the core message of everything is people are still making stuff behind closed doors. Like, people are still, working on things that they can't talk about, or they can't, share, or that, is like, well, I can't work on this publicly, and I can't work on this with a studio, but I can work on this for myself, and I can, work on my craft and my artwork, and I can do, my own thing. And I think that the real, like, takeaway is being able to stay self-motivated rather than outwardly motivated or inspired by others, making sure that, you know a lot of your own inspiration for why you do what you do, whatever your craft, or whatever your artistic talent drive is, that a good chunk of your motivation comes from you just wanting to do it. And I think that that's something that has helped me stay focused, throughout all the strikes, throughout all the nonsense, throughout the literal and fictoral fires that have been going around all this time. It's a lot of just like, I like what I do. I love voice acting. I love the idea of games and animation, and I love the passion behind it, and I love the people who make it. So my own drive for keeping it alive is keeping me going, and my own love for making things and interacting and performing just allows me to do that. And sometimes you just need to sit in your room with yourself and monologue, just for the sake of, like, do I have this? Do I want to do this? Is this something that I still love? And, performing for yourself as the audience, and, getting a good performance out of you to keep yourself motivated is one of those things that I think more people should take advantage of.
Honestly, yeah, absolutely, just 100% everything you said. Absolutely. Yeah, man, now I kind of wanted to ask, like, what is something that's been, because, like we said, you were just talking about, we all have to find, we have to have that, like, if we were to go back and just really think to ourselves, what is something that really made us fall in love with this franchise, or just made us fall in love with, storytelling, acting, just so on and so forth. It just kind of really brings us back to that little kid in you that's like, man, I would love to work on stories and just really bring this to life. Like, what is something that I could give to this you know, that might be missing? Like, we can all just praise or just critique media, but it's like, hey, I mean, if you want to make something better, then, yeah, what is something that you can bring to it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a level of grounding that needs to happen. And, like, one of the things that I've actually, like, taken into consideration, especially over the last couple months, first of all, I realized I actually had cable still, like cable TV, real actual cable, not subscription services or SVOD services or video on demand or whatever. I actually have legitimate cable that just comes with my apartment for free. And so one day when the internet was out, I decided, it's like, well, let's just watch TV. And they had some classic, I think it was like WeTune TV or something like that, because Boomerang doesn't exist anymore and all this different stuff. But, like, they were playing uh, cartoons from the late 60s to early 80s. And there was some stuff that I was less familiar with there, but it was really cool to just hear the performances and listen to these things. And, like, of course everybody goes, it's like, oh, I love Mel Blanc, I love, it's like, I love classic Looney Tunes, I love classic Mickey Mouse and everything like that. But like seeing some of these other shows that like you know these other cartoon shows that are lesser known or like lesser traveled or lesser talked about. There was one show and I can't remember the name of it. It was basically like it almost felt like a more all ages King of the Hill if it was made in the early 80s or late 70s, where it's this dad who's a business dad, and like his kids are more on the side of hippies and free spirited. His wife is definitely of that like 60s 70s era, but she's a little bit more like, well, you got to let the kids grow and you got to let them do things, and she's a little bit more whimsical about it, and while still being, delegated specifically to the homemaker role because that's, product of its time. But it was kind of interesting to see a show like that, and like the dad ends up meeting with this his daughter's new friend, who is this free-spirited hippie guy who's just like, yeah, I don't have a job and I don't do any of this stuff and I don't really care to do any of it. And what ended up happening, he's just like, I think this guy needs you know, to get a real job, and that'll help fix him and everything like that. The dad gives him a job, puts him in there, and when he comes into work the next day, all of his workers are outside and they're meditating to music with the free spirited teenager guy. And when they go back into into work, they're working more efficiently, they're working happier, they're talking more, and they're being together more. And the dad reflects on this, and all the while the performances are still somewhat cartoony. Like they're not what I'd say is more typical now, which is very grounded, very realistic, very like, we don't want any, no super anime style voices, no super cartoony voices. They were still fairly cartoony voices. They were grounded in a very real script, but they still had a very cartoony delivery to them, being very overly dramatic and very, overly projecting and being exaggerated in vocal points so that they can exaggerate the movement of the characters. And it felt like it was just kind of a revitalization of something in my mind. And I remember things like Scooby-Doo, where the performances aren't necessarily absolutely bonkers and off the walls, but they're exaggerated in a lot of ways. And the scripts are goofy and weird, but then they're supported by like the exaggerated animation. And it's this blend of, fantastical, whimsical, but also grounded in reality. And um how do I explain? There's an early 90s clip of The Simpsons that goes around on vertical video, which is to say Instagram Reels or TikTok a lot, where it's all the kids from The Simpsons sitting around and the animation producers are standing there and they're just like, okay, so tell us, how many of you kids would like, a cartoon that deals with real life issues that you kids would go and deal with? And all of them cheer and and are just like, yeah, really excited about this. And it's like, okay, now how many of you want to see, the complete opposite, fantastical stories with magic and mystery and crazy explosions and everything like that? And all of them start cheering too. And the producer, the executives for the studio are just like, so you want a grounded, down to earth, real story with magic and wizards and mayhem and monsters? And all the kids just kind of look to each other and nod and everything like that. And it's passed around as kind of like some mythical thing that doesn't exist, and it's like it could never possibly exist. And reflecting on it, I'm just like, it made me think about Moon Girl more recently, where the performances are cartoony for a good like 75% of the cast. The core cast is more grounded, but they have their moments of crazy animation and overly projecting to really emphasize a moment. But it's Moon Girl and Devil's Dinosaur. There's interdimensional travel. There's a giant red dinosaur in the Lower East Side. There's all sorts. There's a rat king who's living under the sewers of New York as one of the villains. There's all this wonderful fantastical stuff with wonderful fantastical performances from a lot of different people and actors, and the animation supports that, but it's also a very grounded story. And it made me realize that there's a lot of stuff that people complain about, and it's like, oh well, this stuff doesn't exist. It's like, all that stuff does exist. It may not be necessarily as common, but not only does it exist, but it's out there and waiting for you. And finding those things, actually taking time to step away from whatever is either popular or normal or the trending topic of the time, and taking a look at things that are outside of your usual purview or anything like that, and reflecting on the things you wanted to see growing up, the things you liked seeing growing up, and things you want to see now, and like actually searching for it. One of the things I decided to do this year is revitalize my love of video games a little bit more, especially during the whole video game strike. I stream very regularly. I'm a VTuber and all that stuff. Which I feel is like very common for a lot of voice actors these days. Is, well, we're in strikes. We're streaming too because we want to stay connected to fans and to our communities and to everybody, and we still want to vocally perform. And VTubing feels like this happy medium, while also doing something fun like playing games or doing podcasts and so on and so forth. But I decided that since the video game strike was going on, I wanted to, ignore anything new that was coming out and really take a look at some of the stuff that was stuff that I liked before, stuff that I was enjoying, or stuff that I might have missed. And I decided to beat 205 games in 2025, and I've been going through a lot of that stuff. And it's really like brought me back to a space of just like, I like things. I like to like things. I don't like to not like stuff. And it's made me really just sit back and be more critical about like, if I'm going to say I don't like something, I must understand that it's either just not for me, or I'm just not personally passionate about it, and that's fine. It's something that you can kind of walk away from and find other things to enjoy. And I feel like there's this cycle of perpetual like turmoil of just like, if I don't like something, I have to share how much I don't like it. And I think that drives us into a place where we are negative creatively. And I think that kind of same trend happens in these spirals of, well, there's a fire, and then there's a metaphorical fire, and then there's a strike, and then there's a different, there's industry layoffs and so on and so forth. It gets you into this downward spiral where you start thinking all these negative things and thinking about all these things that you don't like and you hate these things. And it's like taking a moment and taking a step away from it to recenter yourself, refocus, understand, and take a look at the stuff that you like again. What made you want to even attempt to go into these areas is really important. And it humbles you creatively, passionately, and it centers you as a person. And I think that's good. And I think humbling is definitely one of those things that lately has been turned into like, oh, getting humbled means that you're being put in your place. But humbling is supposed to be a peaceful thing, something that drives you back to a center, back to your core.
Mm, yeah. I think the good thing is you kind of answered a lot of my questions that I sort of would keep in my back pocket, but no, I think that kind of is sort of we're kind of starting to get to the ending, wrapping up section of the interview. So, if there's anything else, like any last bit of advice that you want to share to those out there that want to do what you're doing in a way,
Yeah, of I
yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
one of the biggest things is that um understanding where we are right now, and being both analytical about your personal story, your personal growth, your journey, as it were, which is to say, if you're looking at somebody else and being like, well, why can't I just do that because I want to, you're focusing on the comparisons, and comparison is the murderer of joy, and it is the, quite frankly, the assassin of any productivity in thought. Um so when you take a look at it, it's like, oh well, these actors started after me, and they're already doing the anime stuff that I want to do, or they got a game, or they have an agent. And it's like, you need to find your own speed, and you need to understand that sometimes the speed isn't going to be dictated by you or your efforts. Sometimes it's just gonna be a matter of luck. And I do feel that like 99% of what happens in the industry, as far as like getting roles, and it's right place, right time, and right person, giving you a shot. And it is 99% luck. And what is inside that 99% luck is preparation, being ready, because if you're not ready for that lucky moment, then that lucky moment is going to pass you by and go to somebody else. So taking time to work on your own craft, it's very easy to say the same thing that I feel like a lot of people have said before, which is take classes, learn from casting directors, do all this stuff. What I would say is take an even further step back in those places. Find the things that motivated you to jump into your craft. Um, Rewatch your favorite things. Listen to the performances. Um, work on your own and understand that. And one of the things that I feel like is underrated is reading books is really important in all this stuff. There's quite a few book assets out there, and it takes you away from the thought process that everything is 100% about the voice, 100% about the performance or anything like that. Because sometimes it really is just like there's been so many things that I have gone in for, and like okay, I got cast as this particular character, and by the end of a 4 or 5 hour recording session, I've recorded my one character within that first 2 hours. And then because they're just like, oh, we have some time left and so on and so forth. And then they extend the time because they hear my range. It's like, well, what kind of range do you have fully? Because an audition is only an audition. It only shows a small amount of you. So you got to be ready for that question. It's like, well, what else can you do while you're already there? While you already got the role for the thing you want to do, showing off and being able to flex in that moment is huge. It's massive. It's so more important. And I've basically gotten more work doing the ancillary than anything else before. And I think that that's one of those things that I'm actually kind of happy about. And it may sound silly, but it's those background things, those additional characters, those characters that fill in the void, and never being able to be picked out of the lineup. Where I have in my natural speaking voice, I have a very distinct voice, and people are able to pick me out when I'm doing big character role, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, oh, that must be Kdin, that must be her. But when it comes to the ancillary stuff where I get to flex a bit more and I get to be a little bit more adventurous, I get to, really showcase my abilities. And I think that that's the thing that people need to be able to do is work on yourself. Work on yourself first, because when that luck comes, you need to be ready to just like take the bull by the horns and really grab it. Because the moment the luck flows through your fingers, you don't know when it's going to come back, and it's a good opportunity to really flex yourself. One of the things I got to do with a friend during this whole time was I got to do two indie animations. One was Spider-Verse versus My Hero Academia, where I got to voice Spider-Gwen. And then another one was for something called Retro Zombie Fight, where I got to be all the zombies fight, and I got to be like, oh, I got to be like two zombies and the main character. And it's all fighting efforts. And it was great practice for fighting efforts, which is something that I feel like is underrated. I think fighting efforts, especially for like video games and animation, they can be more challenging for a lot of folks. So, find your weak points, work on them. You are your own weapon in this war for the arts. So if you're not honed and you're not skilled, then your sword will break, and you want to make sure that you're in a good place for that.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, I don't want to take much more of your time. Thank you so much for joining me on this nice little chat of just wisdom and knowledge. Just a lot of this whimsical knowledge that we've just, learned today. So thank you for that. And I'm pretty sure that people can find your social media, your website, what roles you've done. And I also wanted to say I love you in Ruby. Just wanted to throw that out
Thank you.
there
I really
before we wrap it
appreciate
up.
it.
Yeah. But until next time, folks, take it easy, take care, God loves you, and God bless. Stay cool. And until then, bye bye. Have a great rest of the summertime. Stay cool and stay hydrated always. Bye bye.